Somewhere in this world, at this very moment, a person who understands an ancient truth is performing an act with a single piece of currency that defies everything modern society teaches about wealth. They are not tucking it away in a savings account. They are not placing it into investment portfolios. They are not even spending it on themselves. What they are doing is so counterintuitive, so apparently foolish to the rational mind, that if I reveal it without proper context, you will dismiss this entire teaching. But if you journey with me to the end, you will comprehend why this simple gesture, requiring less than 60 seconds, awakens a cosmic law that has transformed the fortunes of families across millennia. This is not financial manipulation. This is not a scheme designed to extract wealth from others. This is something that those who walk in alignment with divine flow practice as naturally as breathing, as instinctively as the heart beats within the chest. They understand something about the nature of abundance that 99 out of every 100 souls have never grasped. Wealth does not expand through accumulation. Wealth expands through circulation, and the manner in which you set that circulation in motion determines the measure of what returns to your hands. By the conclusion of this teaching, you will know precisely how this operates, and you will possess the power to practice it this very evening with nothing more than a single bill. In the summer heat of 1995, in a city far from where most of you sit today, a man of 28 summers named Daniel Herrera sat upon the bare floor of an empty dwelling counting metal coins. He arranged them in small towers upon the cold tile beneath him. Towers of the smallest denominations. Towers of slightly larger value. Towers that represented the last fragments of his material security. When his hands finished their work and his mind completed its calculation, the total sum before him amounted to barely enough to purchase 3 modest meals. This was the entirety of his earthly possessions, every cent, every atom of his financial existence. Daniel had spent 5 years as a delivery driver for a distribution company, transporting packaged goods to small merchants throughout the metropolitan region. It was not glamorous work. It was not the kind of labor that makes mothers boast to their neighbors, but it was steady. He would rise before dawn, climb into a white commercial vehicle loaded with product, and spend 12 hours navigating crowded streets, unloading boxes, collecting payments. He would return as the sun descended, his clothing saturated with the smell of fried foods and industrial oil. The compensation was modest, but sufficient to rent a single room, consume 3 meals daily, and send a small portion to his elderly mother, who lived in a distant rural province, scraping together an existence on land that yielded less with each passing season. Then, in the 6th month of that year, the company collapsed. The economic crisis that had swept through the nation like a devouring fire consumed it completely. The owner, a heavy-set man who perpetually filled the office with cheap cigar smoke, gathered all the workers in the parking area one morning and announced that the flow of money had ceased. He offered each man a handshake and a severance payment that matched exactly what the law demanded and not a single coin beyond. Daniel departed that place carrying an envelope of cash that immediately vanished into overdue rent and an outstanding dental bill. 2 months later, without employment, without savings, with only those small towers of coins upon the floor, Daniel found himself at the lowest point of his existence. He had searched everywhere: distribution companies, manufacturing facilities, mechanical workshops, the wholesale food market where he offered to load heavy sacks at 4 in the morning. Nothing materialized. The job market had withered. Every available position attracted 50 desperate candidates, and Daniel, with his limited formal education and his narrow experience operating a delivery vehicle, was never the first choice. never even the 10th choice. What crushed his spirit most completely was the weekly telephone call to his mother. Each Sunday, he would walk to the public telephone at the street corner, feeding coins into the machine, while his mother's voice, thin and distant through the crackling line, would ask how he fared. Daniel would construct elaborate falsehoods. "I am doing well, Mother. Still working hard, making progress." He never spoke of the 2 consecutive days when his only sustenance had been beans with stale tortillas. He never mentioned the landlord's final warning. He never described the physical sensation of sleeping with a knot of anxiety lodged so firmly in his stomach that even warm water could not dissolve it. One afternoon in the 8th month, Daniel walked through the older commercial district without destination or purpose. The heat pressed down upon him. That suffocating summer heat that soaks through clothing and darkens moods. He moved past shuttered storefronts, past commercial spaces, displaying signs offering rental opportunities, past the skeletal remains of an economy still struggling to resurrect itself from catastrophic collapse. He turned down a narrow side street, and something caused him to stop walking. A small shop, barely wider than a single vehicle, with a striped fabric awning over the entrance, and a hand-painted sign that read, "Imported Goods, Jewelry Textiles." The door stood open. Inside he could glimpse a glass display counter containing inexpensive ornaments and a shelf holding rolls of colorful fabric. Daniel had no intention of entering. He possessed no funds to purchase anything, but something pulled at him. Perhaps the cool air flowing from within. Perhaps simple curiosity. Perhaps something without name that functions like an invisible thread hooked into the center of the chest, drawing you toward moments that will reshape your entire existence. He crossed the threshold. The shop carried the scent of new fabric and subtle incense. Behind the counter, a man of approximately 60 years arranged cardboard boxes on a wooden shelf. He was short in stature, completely bald, wearing round spectacles and a closely trimmed gray beard. His white shirt had long sleeves rolled to the elbows, and upon his head sat a small embroidered cap. When Daniel entered, the man looked up without surprise, as though he had been expecting this exact visitor, though such expectation was obviously impossible. "Good afternoon," Daniel said, from habit. "Good afternoon," the man replied, with an accent Daniel could not place. Not local, not from any neighboring country. Something that suggested another continent, filtered through decades of living in this new land. Daniel moved slowly through the shop, observing items he could not afford. Silver bracelets, decorative earrings, bolts of patterned cloth, and in one corner, something that captured his attention. A small shelf containing old books, some in the local language, others in a script he did not recognize. "Do you appreciate books?" the man asked from behind his counter. "Somewhat. I read infrequently. Those who read little know only what they were taught by others. Those who read extensively know what they discovered for themselves. Which would you prefer to become?" Daniel turned to look at him. It was an unusual question to hear from a shopkeeper, but the manner of its delivery calm and without arrogance, like someone offering something without forcing acceptance, sparked genuine curiosity within him. "What would you recommend?" Daniel asked. The man emerged from behind the counter, approached Daniel, and studied him carefully from head to foot, not with contempt, with assessment, like a tailor measuring dimensions before cutting cloth. "You have recently lost something significant," the man said. "I can see it, in your clothing, in your eyes. The eyes of someone who has lost something important carry a particular opacity that the rest of the face cannot conceal." Daniel did not respond, but he felt his throat constrict. Before I continue with what transpired next, I must pause here. I know that most who watch these teachings rarely choose to subscribe or acknowledge their value. But if you who hear my voice now have already subscribed to this channel and have indicated your appreciation, I wish to express genuine gratitude. These teachings require time to uncover, care to compose, and dedication to share properly. Your support carries more significance than you comprehend. Thank you. Now let us proceed, because what follows will reshape how you perceive the very nature of flow and abundance. The man introduced himself. His name was Aaron. Aaron Benzion had arrived in this country from Morocco at the age of 17, carrying a small leather suitcase and a cloth bag filled with spices that his mother had pressed into his hands so he would possess something to sell upon arrival. Those spices became his first enterprise. He sold them door to door throughout the immigrant quarter for 3 months. With the profit, he purchased more spices, then inexpensive textiles, then costume jewelry. And so, coin by coin, transaction by transaction, he constructed what had become this small but wholly owned shop in the commercial district. "Sit," Aaron said to Daniel, gesturing toward a wooden stool beside the counter. Daniel sat. Aaron poured tea into a small glass cup. Without asking permission, he placed it before Daniel and seated himself on the opposite side of the counter. "I am going to share with you something my father taught me the night before I boarded the ship that brought me to this land. It is the most valuable possession I carry, more valuable than this shop, more valuable than any merchandise within these walls." Daniel lifted the glass. The tea was hot, tasting of mint and honey. "My father was poor," Aaron continued, "poorer than you are at this moment. We lived in a neighborhood of Casablanca where the houses were constructed of bare brick and water came from a communal well. But my father performed an action every Friday that I could not comprehend. Every Friday, before the Sabbath, he would take a coin, the smallest one available to him. Sometimes it was barely enough to purchase a piece of bread, and he would give it away to a beggar in the marketplace, to a widow collecting alms, to anyone whose hand was extended in need, without fail, every single week, for as long as I possessed memory of him. I remember one particular Friday. I was perhaps 10 years old. We had almost nothing that week. My mother had stretched our food supply so thin that we were consuming watered-down soup with scraps of yesterday's bread. I watched my father take our last coin, the one my mother had hidden for an emergency, and I saw him place it into the palm of a stranger sitting outside our neighborhood. I confronted him when he returned. I actually shouted at him, something children did not do in those days. "Why did you give away the only money we have? We need that. We are starving." My father did not strike me. He did not raise his voice. He pulled me close, and he said something I have never forgotten. He said, "My son, you believe that coin was ours to keep. But that coin never belonged to us. Everything that flows into our hands comes from the source of all, and it flows through us, not to us. When you understand that you are a channel, not a container, then you understand the secret of true wealth. A closed hand cannot receive. A dam stops the river and creates stagnation. But a channel remains open on both ends, and the water flows through continuously, endlessly, bringing life to everything it touches." I did not understand him that day. I was young, I was hungry, I was angry. But 3 days later, something extraordinary occurred. A merchant my father had helped years before, someone we had completely forgotten, arrived at our door with a business opportunity. He needed my father's skill in textile repair for an urgent contract. The payment he offered was more than my father typically earned in an entire month. That single transaction fed our family for weeks and opened a door to steady work that continued for years. That was when I began to understand. The coin my father gave on Friday was not lost. It was seed planted in soil we cannot see, and the harvest that returned was far greater than the seed that was sown. Aaron paused, looking directly at Daniel with an intensity that seemed to peer beneath the surface of skin and bone. "This is not superstition," he said. "This is law. The same law that governs the rain cycle. Water rises from the ocean as vapor. It forms clouds. It falls as rain upon the earth. It nourishes the crops. It flows back to the ocean. The cycle is complete because nothing is hoarded at any stage. Everything keeps moving. The moment you try to stop the flow, the moment you build a dam and say, 'This is mine and I will hold it here,' that is precisely when scarcity enters your experience." Aaron reached beneath the counter and withdrew a crisp $1 bill. He placed it on the counter between them. "This is for you," he said, "but it comes with an instruction. You must give this away within 24 hours. Not spend it on yourself, not save it. Give it to anyone. A person cleaning car windows at a traffic signal, someone begging for food, a street vendor struggling to make a sale. It does not matter to whom. What matters is the act of opening your hand. What matters is declaring to the universe through action, not words, that you are a channel, not a dam. Can you do this?" Daniel stared at the bill. $1. In his current state of desperation, $1 could purchase a meal, could pay for the phone call to his mother he had been avoiding, could delay eviction by one more day if added to what little he had remaining. The logical part of his mind screamed that this was foolishness, that he needed every cent, that giving away anything when you possessed almost nothing was the definition of insanity. But another part of him, a quieter part, a part that lived somewhere deeper than rational calculation, whispered that he had already tried the logical approach, and it had led him to counting coins on a bare floor. What did he have to lose by trusting this strange shopkeeper with the kind eyes and the ancient wisdom? Daniel picked up the bill. "What happens after I give it away?" he asked. Aaron smiled. "That is the wrong question," he replied. "The right question is what happens inside of you the moment your hand opens. That is where the transformation begins, not in what comes back. In who you become when you choose flow over fear." Daniel left the shop with the dollar bill folded in his pocket, and Aaron's words circling in his mind like birds that would not settle. He walked through the streets as afternoon dissolved into evening, and he found himself at a busy intersection where a young man, perhaps 20 years old, moved between stopped vehicles with a dirty cloth offering to clean windshields for whatever people would give. Daniel had passed this same intersection hundreds of times. He had always kept his windows up, his eyes forward, treating these desperate workers as invisible obstacles rather than human beings struggling exactly as he was struggling. The traffic light turned red. The young man approached Daniel's side of the street, his face streaked with sweat and grime. Daniel rolled down his window. The young man looked surprised, then hopeful. Before he could speak, Daniel extended the dollar bill. "Here," Daniel said. "This is for you." The young man's eyes widened. He reached for the money with a hand that trembled slightly. "God bless you," he whispered. "God bless you and multiply what you have given." Daniel drove away before the light changed, and something inside his chest loosened, something that had been clenched tight for months. He felt lighter, not because he expected anything in return, but because for the first time in longer than he could remember, he had acted from a place of abundance rather than scarcity. He had given when logic said he should hoard. He had opened his hand when fear demanded he make a fist. 22 hours later, Daniel received a phone call. A former colleague from the distribution company, someone he had barely known, someone he had not spoken with since the business collapsed. The man explained that he had started working for a moving company that was desperately short-handed. They needed someone immediately, someone who could drive, someone who could lift heavy items, someone reliable. The pay was not extraordinary, but it was work, steady work, starting the following morning. Could Daniel be there? Daniel stood holding the telephone receiver, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. "Yes," he said. "Yes, I can be there." He hung up the phone and sat down on the edge of his bed, his hands shaking. 22 hours, less than one full day after opening his hand, an opening had appeared in the wall of his circumstances. Coincidence, his rational mind insisted. Pure random chance. But the deeper part of him, the part that had whispered trust when Aaron handed him that dollar bill, knew better. This was flow. This was the law in motion. The moving company work was physically brutal. 10 to 12 hours daily lifting furniture, carrying boxes up narrow staircases, loading and unloading trucks under the unforgiving sun. But Daniel attacked it with fierce gratitude. He arrived early. He stayed late. He treated every customer's possessions as though they were sacred treasures, entrusted to his care. And every single day without exception, he gave something. $5 to the elderly man who watched vehicles on the street corner. $10 to the young person who cleaned windshields at the traffic light, the same intersection where he had given away Aaron's dollar. An hour of his Sunday helping an elderly woman from his neighborhood move heavy furniture she could not lift alone. Each action was small. Each appeared insignificant on the surface. But Daniel felt each one as a coin deposited into an invisible treasury that operated according to laws different from the bank on the corner. 3 weeks into the moving job, while helping relocate a wealthy family to a property in an expensive neighborhood, the woman who owned the home said something that changed everything. "You are the first moving worker who has treated my belongings with genuine respect," she told Daniel. "Would you be interested in doing something beyond carrying furniture?" She owned an interior design firm. She needed someone to transport delicate items, fine furniture, art pieces, antique objects. Not every driver could handle such work. It required someone trustworthy, someone careful. She offered him an exclusive transportation contract. The compensation tripled what he was earning at the moving company. Daniel accepted. He gave notice to the moving company with sincere gratitude, shaking his supervisor's hand and thanking him for the opportunity. The supervisor, who had watched dozens of workers come and go without a single word of appreciation, looked at Daniel with unexpected respect. "If you ever need anything in the future, you know where to find me," he said. Another door left open, not through strategic networking, through basic human decency, through flow. With the money he had saved from the moving work, Daniel purchased a used pickup truck, a white Ford from 1991 with faded paint and over 100,000 miles on the engine, but mechanically sound and with enough cargo space to transport delicate items safely. He modified it himself. He bought thick moving blankets from a second-hand market. He constructed a system using wooden boards and foam padding that allowed him to transport fragile pieces, painting sculptures, antique vases without the slightest movement during transit. It was ingenious. It was practical. It was the invention of someone who had spent 5 years loading snack food boxes and understood exactly how cargo shifts during every turn, every pothole, every sudden stop. The interior design client was deeply impressed with the first delivery, a set of French chairs that arrived in flawless condition at an estate in the wealthiest part of the city. "No one has ever delivered pieces to me in this condition," she told him. She recommended him to a colleague, that colleague to another. Within 3 months, Daniel had 5 steady clients for specialized transportation, art galleries, antique dealers, interior design firms, a market niche that no one else was serving, because every standard moving service treated a 19th century vase the same as a case of bottled drinks. In 6 months, he hired an assistant, a strong and quiet young man from his neighborhood, to whom he taught every detail of his system. In 1 year, he purchased a second truck, also used, also modified by his own hands, and officially registered his business. He chose a simple name without sophisticated logos or internet presence, which barely existed in those years anyway. Just a name, a telephone number, and the reputation of a man who cared for what others entrusted to him as though it belonged to his own family. And every day, without exception, he gave something, every 24 hours without fail. Sometimes money, sometimes time, sometimes food he would purchase in excess at the market and leave at the door of an elderly neighbor who lived alone. Sometimes simply a long conversation with someone who needed to be heard. And each time the silent words, "I am an open channel. What I give is not lost. It multiplies." He no longer did it as effort. He did it as breathing, as something you cannot stop doing because it has become part of your essential nature. Years later, on a Friday afternoon, Daniel parked his truck, no longer the old faded one, but a newer 3-ton vehicle with enclosed cargo space, and his company logo painted on the side in front of Aaron's shop in the commercial district. He entered. The shop remained unchanged, the same scent of fabric and incense, the same glass counter, the same shelf of old books in the back corner. Aaron stood behind the counter, older now, more bent, but still wearing the same round spectacles and the same small embroidered cap upon his head. Daniel carried an envelope. He placed it on the counter. Inside was a crisp new dollar bill without creases or marks, and a note that read, "For the next person who enters with opacity in their eyes." Aaron opened the envelope. He removed the dollar. He read the note. He took off his spectacles and wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. He was not crying exactly, but something glistened there that was not tears. It was satisfaction, the satisfaction of a man who planted a seed and lived long enough to see the tree bearing fruit. "Do you know how many have come since you left, Aaron?" asked Daniel. "How many all who needed to come? Not many, but exactly the right number. And each one received $1, and each one gave it away before the day ended. And each one, without exception, returned to tell me that something shifted. Not always money, sometimes employment, sometimes health, sometimes a relationship that was repaired, sometimes simply inner peace. But something moved, because the flow does not choose the form. The flow only requires an open channel. And each of them, by opening their hand, opened the channel." Daniel looked at him steadily. "And your father, what would he say if he could see all of this?" Aaron put his spectacles back on and smiled. "My father would say exactly what he told me the night before the ship departed. He would say the coin was never the gift, Aaron. The gift was learning to open your hand. What Aaron Benzian taught Daniel in that shop, what his father transmitted to him in Casablanca before a journey without return, is what the sages of the ancient tradition have taught for thousands of years. Tzedakah, not charity, justice, the act of giving not as emotional generosity, but as physical law of flow. Shefa, divine abundance, descends continuously, but it can only enter someone who allows it to exit. It only flows through someone who becomes a channel, not a dam. Wealth does not multiply by hoarding it. Wealth multiplies by moving it, not because it is magic, because it is law. The same law that governs water, blood, air. Everything that flows lives. Everything that stagnates dies. Tonight, do something. Take one bill, the smallest you possess, And tomorrow, before 24 hours pass, give it to someone. It does not matter to whom. It does not matter what amount it represents. What matters is the action, the hand that opens, the flow that begins. And when you give it, say in your mind, I am an open channel of divine abundance. What I give is not lost. It multiplies. Do it tomorrow, and the day after, and the next. Every 24 hours, something flows out from you toward another. And observe what happens. Not what happens externally, what happens internally. Observe how your relationship with wealth transforms, how you cease feeling it as something scarce that must be protected, and begin feeling it as something alive that must be permitted to flow. Because the ancient secret to multiplying a single dollar in 24 hours is not a secret. It is a law. And the law states this: everything you give with faith returns multiplied. Not because the universe owes you anything, but because by giving you opened the door through which what was always waiting could finally enter. One open hand, 24 hours. The flow is waiting. It only needs you to stop being a dam and begin being a river. Now, I want you to do something that will seal this teaching into your consciousness. Write the word Shefa in the comments below. Shefa means divine flow, abundant blessing, the endless stream that seeks to pour into your life the moment you become a channel rather than a container. Write it now. By writing this word, you are declaring your willingness to receive. You are announcing to the forces that govern abundance that you understand the law, that you are ready to open your hand. And if this teaching has touched something deep within you, if you sense that this truth has been waiting for you to discover it, then subscribe to this channel and press the symbol of appreciation, not as a casual gesture, as an act of acceptance. By subscribing, you are saying yes to more wisdom like this entering your awareness. By indicating your appreciation, you are practicing the very law we have discussed. You are giving something, even if only a moment of acknowledgement, and by that, giving you open yourself to receive the multiplied return. The sages knew what modern society has forgotten, that the universe operates not on accumulation, but on circulation, that the person who gives becomes a magnet for receiving, that the hand held open in generosity is the same hand that receives abundance from directions you could never have calculated or predicted. This is not philosophy for intellectual debate. This is practical wisdom for immediate application. This is truth you can test tonight with one single bill and 24 hours of courage. Go now, find that bill, and tomorrow before the sun sets on another day of your life, open your hand and give it to another soul. Speak the words silently as you do. I am an open channel. What I give is not lost. It multiplies. Then watch, not with desperation, not with grasping expectation, but with the calm certainty of someone who has just aligned themselves with a law as reliable as gravity, as constant as the rising sun. The flow has always been there, rushing like an underground river beneath the surface of your awareness, waiting for you to stop damming it with fear and scarcity and the illusion of control. It has been waiting for you to become what you were always meant to be, not a container trying desperately to hold on to every drop, but a channel through which the infinite abundance of creation moves freely, endlessly, generously, bringing life and blessing to everything it touches, including you, especially you, always you. One open hand, 24 hours, the ancient law activated, the flow released. Your transformation beginning not tomorrow, but right now, in this very moment, as you choose to believe that giving is not losing, but multiplying, that opening is not risking, but receiving, that the secret the wise have always known is finally yours.